Hey guys, it's Dr. Mitch. We're picking it up with the treatment issues. I wanted to give you a couple of items. So here's one. Folks who can't feel any changes after drinking 12 beers show A, loss of control, B, withdrawal, C, tolerance, or D, a big beer tab. All right. They drink 10 beers, they don't feel any changes. You know that is tolerance. Ding, 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 ding. Now, a subset of you, I love you. You also are capable of talking yourself into any answer. So I thought this might be a good example. Like, oh, they can't feel anything after 12 beers. Well, they're showing loss of control, or they wouldn't have consumed 12 beers. No, right? If you got to do the if blah blah blah, that's just not right. All right, it should be the most straightforward answer, the option that is the most straightforward. In fact, if you covered these up, and I just wrote, folks who can't feel any changes after drinking 12 beers show, what would you guess, right? Either alcohol insensitivity or tolerance, right? And so then when you see tolerance, ding, you know that's the right answer, right? If you got to talk yourself into it, it's not the right one. Here's another cool item. A moderate substance use disorder diagnosis arises when all symptoms are moderate, clients can't moderate their use, clients have 4 to 5 SUD, meaning substance use disorder symptoms, or clients have 6 of the 9 SUD symptoms. All right, you pick one. All right, its clients have 4 to 5 SUD symptoms. Let's think about it. All symptoms are moderate. Well, we don't really get a severity at the symptom level, even though might have made sense. That's just not how the DSM does it. Clients can't moderate their use. Okay, this is just me kind of clanging, right? Moderate. Don't get sucked into this just because it's the same word. Clients have 4 to 5 symptoms. That's the right answer. Clients have 6 of the 9 SUD symptoms. Now let's talk about process of elimination too, because if you didn't know, at least you could nix this one because you know there are 11 SUD symptoms, right? So that's going to improve your options. Obviously, we're just going to have A, B, and C, but you get the idea. All right, issues about differential diagnosis. I just want to emphasize, basically, if somebody's got a substance use disorder, we want to be able to identify related problems, but there's situations often like in the emergency room or related medical conditions where you can't tell, is this a set of symptoms that come from drug use, or is this a set of symptoms that are part of some comorbid or even premorbid disorder, meaning this was the disorder that drove them to use the drugs or seem to co-occur at the same time, and that's what we're going to get into. But if somebody says, oh, I can't ever sleep, and my heart beats really fast, and sometimes I'm really, really anxious, right? I've got to assess drug use before I go for some kind of anxiety disorder, because maybe they're drinking 19 cups of coffee a day, right? In fact, I had a client in Mississippi who drank 19 Cokes a day. And yeah, what a surprise. He didn't have anxiety disorder. He had too much caffeine. Right? So let's make sure we assess these before we make any other diagnoses. But also, I invariably get, the guy drinks a fifth a day and he's depressed. Well, is it that the substance abuse is making him depressed? Did the depression make him drink? I don't know. But, nobody can drink a fifth a day for long. This is clearly got to intervene, and then we can split hairs about which came first and all of that nonsense. The important thing is to understand differential diagnosis. 3-day crack binge, and you think people are chasing after you with guns. Well, did you rip off a crack dealer? Or is this paranoia? I'm not going to know exactly, unless I've got some clinical skill and get some candid answers. So in an effort to try to identify either comorbid disorders, meaning things that are going to happen in conjunction with drug problems, or things that put folks at risk for developing drug problems. One of those is deviant arousal. All right, so antisocial personality disorder, ADHD, alcoholism. What a surprise. These often, not all the time, but cluster together. Conduct disorder, same deal, right? What's up with antisocial personality disorder? Well, one of the dominant theories is, hey, they just aren't very aroused. And so they do antisocial stuff just to get a kick out of it. ADHD, why are people jumping around and can't sit still? In part, it's because arousal is inadequate. And so they often respond well to psychostimulants because then their brain is appropriately aroused and they can sit still. Alcoholism co-varies with this. Despite popular belief, alcohol is a stimulant on the ascending limb. Not that everybody wants to agree with me with that, but that's basically how I got tenure, was showing that that happens in folks who are at high risk for alcoholism. So, if you're Asian and turn red and fall asleep after you drink, you're unlikely to become an alcoholic. In contrast, if you're the only one awake after everybody else has passed out, odds are high you may be at risk. Right? Thought disorder, don't even get into this, but yes, some of the psychotic disorders tend to co-vary with drug use, but it's relatively rare. So let's just get into sort of what are the big comorbidities, meaning what are the disorders that often co-vary with drug problems. Generally, the impulse control ones. So I already alluded to them. Antisocial personality disorder is basically you can't control impulses or you don't learn from punishment, right? Anybody who's disinhibited, right, can't inhibit their dominant response is going to be at risk for this, and the ADHD kids as well. Now, it's ironic, but ADHD kids who end up on psychostimulants are at less risk for subsequent drug problems. My student Alison Luby reviewed that literature recently and showed that's basically the case. More importantly, there are other disorders to keep in mind because they've got contributions to the problem. So let's take a look at problem gambling. At least a third and often more than half of problem gamblers report drug problems. So this is a kind of neglected disorder, and it's unfortunate because now that gambling is so easy to do on the web, folks literally can end up, 6 digits in debt simply because they're, eating stimulants and playing poker online, and suddenly, the house is mortgaged again, and this is really rough, and it's important to go ahead and probe for this. I know a subset of you are skill-based, wonderful, poker players. That's great, but you definitely don't want to do this in conjunction with anything impairing like alcohol or cannabis. And okay, if you think better, we'll challenge those cognitions later. But this is a really important issue. And then, I was watching World Series of Poker, and it wasn't the finals, but it was getting close, and it pretty much was obvious that 4 of the 6 people at the table were on Adderall, right? And this tacit assumption that, I'm going to abuse a psychostimulant and that's going to help me win. We don't really have those data. Eating disorders, it's a subset, and really sad. I used to work with these folks. I love these clients, but they're doing their best. I do have a paper out with Christina Sharma on cannabis and eating disorder symptoms. Obviously, cannabis is not going to help a binge eater, but I was wrong when I thought that. And a subset of the binge eaters said actually cannabis helps me savor, right? Helps me pay attention to the food, and then I don't end up binging. I enjoy a reasonable amount. They are at high risk for some of the psychostimulants, so they like the ones that, of course, have these anorectic effects. I mean, the ones that make it so they don't have an appetite. Anorexia is probably one of our most lethal psychological disorders. If you are struggling, feel free to email me, make a recommendation. But man, man, I love food. I got to admit, I may not be the most empathic person to talk to, but I'm happy to make a referral. So ADD, as I mentioned, children with attention deficit disorder are at increased risk for initiating the use of substances, but it's often as a result of this kind of weird self-medication. So I've got data from my lab suggest not the inattentive, but the hyper subtype do seem to use cannabis and claim they even benefit from it. Not that I think that would be a first choice, but the psychostimulants I was really resistant in the 80s, the data are there, right? Start low and go slow. I mean, 10 milligrams of Adderall, probably enough for most people. It's not a study drug. It doesn't make you smart. It's not limitless or whatever. But if you do have these symptoms, folks do seem to respond well. And it's a buffer against these problems with crack and meth and cocaine intranasally and things like that. And in fact, we're seeing methylphenidate and some of the other stimulants are reasonable psychopharmacological treatments to help cocaine abuse in particular. So conduct disorder, if you guys have had abnormal, you remember this is basically just antisocial personality disorder light. It's sort of the kid version, so you may not be beating the crap out of people or robbing banks, but you're torturing animals and lighting fires. And it's unfortunate that these tend to go together, and it's that broad kind of, I don't like legal and societal sanctions. Maybe you can get it under control and become a psychology professor and write a big book about pot, but odds are high it's worth intervening here, and these folks don't necessarily respond to medications. One good therapeutic relationship can really make a big difference for an adolescent or young adult. And the personality disorders, many personality disorders co-occur with substance abuse problems. I'm not thrilled with the discriminant validity on the diagnoses of these, but yes, antisocial personality disorder definitely, and borderline personality disorder definitely puts folks at risk for problematic use of drugs. So if you're having problems regulating your emotions or respecting the law, this is worth having that conversation. So the mood disorders, both depression and the bipolars, these folks, what a surprise, turn to drugs because they alter their mood. So depression puts folks at big elevated risk for abuse of almost any drug, even the sedatives, which kind of blew my mind, right? And the bipolars, man, when they're up, and they love the speeders, and when they're down, and they love the speeders, and it's just like, whoa. So again, if folks are abusing a drug and seem to have some kind of mood disorder, I'm not going to be able to figure it out until we get the drug use under reasonable control. For the anxiety disorders, it's essentially expectancy moderated. What do I mean by that? Folks with anxiety disorders don't necessarily have problems, particularly with alcohol or the sedatives, unless they have the expectancy that alcohol is going to help them. So, I mean, social anxiety, the fact that it's even a diagnosis, I mean, sorry, but when I was little, that was called being shy. And the intervention is the same. Train up in the social skills. Alcohol may be a social lubricant, but odds are high if you learn how to say, oh, that's very interesting, tell me more. You can, improve your social interactions, don't have to get worked up, and then you don't end up having to deal with any of that. The important thing is not everybody with an anxiety disorder is going to necessarily develop a drug-related problem, but you do want to probe with those folks about their expectations of drug-related impact on their symptoms and discuss drug use with them. So I did want to say a word or two about suicide just because it is such a bummer. And what can I say? people, want to have debates on the ethics of suicide and the right to suicide and blah, blah, blah. All I can say is, hey, I've been there too. Like, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, which has become such a cliche, but odds are high if you're intoxicated, you're not making your best decisions, particularly decisions that you can't go back on. So suicidal ideation, even passive suicidal ideation, like putting your head on the pillow going, it'd be okay if I just never woke up or something like that. Intervene right away. Email me. We'll get you at the PSC, get you a referral, blah, blah, blah. Life is worth it. Trust me, if yours isn't, I'm happy to tell you how to make it so, right? And what a surprise, depending on which data set you look at, as many as a third of completed suicides, and I do not like to say successful. I don't know why people, that is like a horrible expression, but completed suicides, depending on which data you look at, up to 1/3 of the people have alcohol in their systems at the time. I mean, what a dreadful, egregious error, right? Now, okay, you got terminal cancer and you don't want to bankrupt your family and spend a year in chemo. Completely different world. Although the psilocybin-assisted cancer-related distress, I would be eager to discuss with you. Bottom line is, this is rarely the answer, and folks at high risk are folks who are often intoxicated. Diagnostic procedures and documentation. The list of potential assessment instruments is long and varied. All right, the problem is the way the tenure system works is the more you publish or have your name attached to some phenomenon, or if you make up a scale of your own, then you're more likely to get tenure. It's stupid, right? Odds are high. I could literally go 0 to 10. How much are drugs fucking with you? And that would correlate as well or better with treatment outcome and your genuine other problems as anything else. So these varied, freak out, multi-item things are probably unnecessary. What's important about them is they definitely take advantage of the notion that, hey, there's going to be psychological contributors, there's going to be social contributors, biological contributors, and we want to get a feel for all of this, not because it's going to have that much impact on treatment yet, but because we want to know so we can make better treatments as we go along. And then with that in mind, I'm going to segue then to the biopsychosocial model of drug problems. And if you're a fan of the biopsychosocial spiritual model of drug problems, I'm not trying to offend you or anything. It's just I didn't get the chance to review that literature. And the religiosity drug work seems to pan out for alcohol, but not for cannabis. So I'm still confused and trying to make sense of it. And the hallucinogens, ayahuasca, things like, there's some religions where they have a psychoactive sacrament, and I don't want to be like culturally obtuse about it. But what's the take-home message of the biopsychosocial model? Each of these things is not only relevant, but in different people, different parts of it kind of drive the system, right? So, some of the early gateway work, they were like, these people did crack before cannabis. There must be no gateway theory. And I was like, I don't believe in gateway theory, but they did crack before cannabis because crack is on the corner in their neighborhood and cannabis is not. Like, it's just a social, availability issue. In contrast, there's a subset of folks who inherit basically certain biological qualities that it's not that it makes them an addict or something like that, but it contributes to their response to drugs. And if that response is particularly positive and they're in an environment where there aren't a whole lot of other positive reinforcers out, what a surprise. They're the ones who are at risk, right? In contrast, their biological contributors, I have a friend who, when he takes opiates, he barfs. Like half a Vicodin and he would just throw up. He's not going to become a heroin addict this week, I don't think, right? Oh, my Asian friends, the fast flushers, like literally like half a beer and they're just all red and nauseated, he ain't going to become an alcoholic. Right? It's just not going to happen. The psychological things get hairy. There is no, there is no addictive personality per se. But folks who are generally disinhibited, extroverted, adventure seeking, sensation seeking, open to new experiences, if you're willing to, wait a little extra on the line to get that front car on the roller coaster, I want to have a beer with you, but also we're at risk for problems. All right. So I'm going to pick it up here. I really appreciate your patience. I'm trying to keep it in small chunks. I'm keeping the practice items up. It's all going to be great. Stay strong. I'm going to pick it up with the next one right after this one. Take care.